Hey everybody, welcome to another interview in this series on unraveling. I am really excited to share Skip Lackey, who I don't even know what to call you anymore. Our relationship has seen so many iterations, but friend, mentor, I consider him family. Like, he is my go-to person for everything business related, life related, health, healing related. Like, Skip Lackey, and if you read the Unravel book, has so much experience and such a broad, like a wide spectrum of things. And when I first sat down with him, I was blown away by everything that he was doing, everything he had created, everything that he knew. And I think my first ever request of you, besides sitting down for coffee and tea, was, will you be my mentor? And I've just been blessed to know him and learn from him and experience life with him and have him and his wisdom in my life. So thank you, Skip, for being here.
Thank you, Stephanie. And the interesting thing about that is that first coffee that we sat down, I thought to myself, wow, this girl is on top of it. She is awesome. So when you asked me that question, I was kind of blown away because I was thoroughly smitten with you too. So just so that you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, will you tell people, give them a little spiel about what it is that you do and everything about what makes you amazing?
Wow. What makes me
Starting with
amazing?
clown college.
Oh, geez. Well, um, at this point in my life, which I've had like 5 lifetimes already, I'm a life coach, a business and success coach, and I also have a leadership academy. So I take a lot of different skills, as you said earlier, Stephanie. I over the years I've developed a huge toolkit, and my personal mission statement is to help 5 million people wake up to the truth of who they are by whatever means necessary. So I've gathered up a lot of those means necessary to help people at wherever they're at in their life and their business. And for a number of years, I was doing it um, from a personal standpoint. And I realized a lot of people spend, well, almost everybody spends, the bulk of their day at work. So I was thinking, how can I help people have a better work-life balance and a work life? And in doing that, they're spending 8 or 10 hours a day working. They would be bringing that into their home life, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And that it would really help transform people's lives. So I've tilted my table a little bit to help people lead better lives, and more engaged lives and impassioned lives
Yeah.
at work and at home.
Yeah.
So, and my background is kind of unique and different. I don't have a degree in psychology like a lot of people that do this kind of work that I do have. I was right out of high school. I decided I wanted to be an actor, and I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. And a friend of mine gave me an application to Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Clown College, and I ended up applying and got accepted to Clown College, and ended up being a part of that program. And at the end of it, with Clown College back in the day, it doesn't exist any longer because Ringling Brothers has gone on hiatus. Um, but back in the day, the schooling was free, and if they really liked you, you were obligated to take a contract. So I did that and graduated close to the top of the class, and it was a clown with Ringling, and then moved to New York, and then was doing Broadway, and as a singer and a dancer and an actor. I ended up being in a bunch of movies. I was on a soap opera for a little bit. I did Nickelodeon. I was a game show host on Nickelodeon for a show called Think Fast, and helped them build out Nick Studios down at Universal Florida. I was Santa Claus for the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. I've done 1,000 voiceovers for radio and television, hundreds of commercials, and all the while, my real passion was personal growth. And I started studying that from I guess my early teens is when I really became a student of personal growth, because I had kind of a bit of a rough childhood, and I found myself depressed, anxious, even to the point of suicidal in my mid-teens, because I wasn't being able to fully express myself and who I was in the household I was growing up in.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to New York and I was an adult, I started trying to understand why my emotions were so shut down and bottled up, and where all the anger that I felt from my childhood was coming from, and started, just doing my own work. And in the midst of that, had a huge trauma with my dad being killed in a plane crash when I was 23. And that drove me deeper into trying to understand and figure out life. And over the years, I just started developing skills, and I was helping friends and family members through difficult times of, PTSD, phobias, hardcore emotional issues, physical issues that were rising, cancer, tumors, all kinds of things. So developed a huge toolkit that now it's when I sit with somebody and I work with somebody, and oftentimes the folks that are coming to me are some that are in, really dire straits, as you were when you first sat in my chair and we started doing the work together you've written about in the book. I can just sit and listen and pull what's necessary to help support people through whatever. And I've done it with, oh God, I don't know, over 15,000 people at this point in my life, directly, through either workshops or one-on-one sessions with people, 15, 20,000. I've lost count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, and I want to say it here because I really mean it and I want people to know it. I've been blessed, I feel like, to know a lot of different people in my life and to have worked with really amazing people in different modalities. But I trust you with my life, like literally. And if you read the book, you'll see why, because later in the story, I stopped swallowing, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But I went to the ER, and the little ER nurse tries to get me to drink water. And I'm like, no, like they told me they couldn't do anything for me. I'm not going to drink water. Like, no way. Wouldn't let an ER nurse give me water in an emergency room. And then I don't remember how many days after that it was, Skip shows up with soup and gets me to eat soup. And I trust you immensely. And it's because of not just our personal relationship and knowing you and knowing your background, but like, you're so amazing at what it is that you do. Like, you're so good at being present with each person and each individual situation and experience, which I think is often missing in a lot of healing work. Like, there's, even in the work that you do, because I learned it, the process work, the journey process work, it starts with a core script, and there's so many people that just like do the thing the way you're supposed to do it. And you're so good at meeting people where they're at, which I think is important for anyone going through a hard time. What do you like, where do you think that skill comes from?
I'll be honest with you. I've been able to pinpoint where I do think it comes from. I think it comes from my acting background, because I had an acting teacher, a very famous teacher named Sanford Meisner. And anybody knows anything about acting, I was blessed to be with one of the 2 or 3 greatest acting teachers that have ever lived. And I spent a couple years with him, and he taught us this exercise. It's called the moment-to-moment exercise, about listening to people and really getting out of yourself, dropping who you are and what you are thinking, and being able to be in the moment with people. And I think that the years that I spent in that acting technique allowed me to really drop in. And the modality that we were teaching, the journey that you mentioned, which is a very powerful modality, Brandon Bays, who was the founder of that and a good friend, was also an actor. And so a lot of these listening skills that we had learned through that, which you wouldn't think, it would be the last thing you think. You think that, people, they're overly dramatic. But to be a good actor, you have to be a good listener, and you have to follow the pace and tempo and drop in empathy and compassion and kindness and really listen. So what it's taught me to do is open up my heart and get out of my head and really listen to what the needs of the person are, even if they're not saying it. It's almost like your heart hears it, and you're able to just then, and these questions will fall out of my mouth at times, and I'm like, where the hell did that come from? And I'll ask a question that will, not always, it doesn't, it's not 100% of the time, but ask a question that will reveal something, help the person reveal something to themselves. Because to me, that's where the real healing happens, is not what I do. It's how do I hold the space for somebody to have their specific experience, because everybody's different. And there is no cookie cutter, and like your work, journey mapping, it allows people to just focus on different areas of where they are at in their own experience and let their own truth be revealed to them through that process. And I think that's where the real value is for anybody that's doing any kind of personal growth work, any healing, is to be with a practitioner that is an excellent listener. And, I will say, I'm not always sometimes I'm like, I have an idea of where we need to go for healing to happen. And I have to consciously sometimes just get out of my way and let that person, they have to learn it on their own. Because me telling somebody it goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't mean anything when you've heard it, because people have said, you shouldn't be doing this. You could be doing that. Do this instead. Right. And it goes in one ear, out the other. And you're like, And then when you get it, it's like, oh, I just had this epiphany, and you can own it. So it really is about helping people find it on their own as opposed to telling someone what it is.
It seems like, because you're really good at improv, I would imagine that's something that you learn in acting school, or at least have to know to be an actor. I feel like that's such a great life skill, because when I've done the process work, or when I've been in coaching sessions or having conversations with people, it's like you can't be prepared. Like, you have no idea where the conversation is going to go, and you have to be able to like roll with it and navigate it.
Well, in improv, the first rule of improv is whatever the other person says, you accept it. You don't push it off. You don't defend it. You don't say, nope, that's not what happened. In improv, you have to go, oh, and in that, I've recognized that when someone says something, it's like, oh, and what if this? So you have to offer things up, and it's an interactivity in a give and a take. No, that's not true. As I'm saying that, it's not a take. It's a give and a give. I've never thought about it in that way, actually, until just saying it with you right now. It's a give and a give. And there are often times when we're in a process, and I have a very structured process that I do, but I have to just let it go. And I'll be 2/3 of the way through the experience, knowing we want to get to the healing and the forgiveness and the deep connection with your source and yourself. And that's where the healing happens. But I'm like, I feel like a little out of control, which is what everybody that's done improv feels, a little out of control. And you don't know. And then eventually it just goes click, 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 click. And then the person goes, oh my God, this is it. And I've done that on my own healings a million times, where I go, I have no idea where this is going. And it just all makes sense at the end, because the conscious and unconscious and the presence of spirit wants you to heal.
Yeah.
The whole body, mind, and spirit is a healing facility. And so it's only when we get in our mind and we get in our own way that things don't happen in divine timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted you not to share your background, not just because I think it's cool that you went to clown college, but I've been thinking a lot about how much can happen in 5 years' time. And I say 5 years specifically because it's been 5 years since Brett passed.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking about how much happens, how much can happen in 5 years, less than that too, like a month, a week, a year. But I think about when I was 13, I was suicidal and depressed. When I was 18, I was purpose driven. I had found design. I knew what I was doing. I graduated high school early. I made it happen. And then by 23, I was lost and depressed again and trying to find myself. And by 28, like all the way to where I am now, which is 35. And I've gone through so much in the last 5 years since his passing. But I was just thinking about, and I thought you'd be the perfect person to have this conversation with, because I've heard you talk about it before, but how we can get so when we're in a challenging chapter or something big happens, or we feel devastated, or we're depressed, or even suicidal, but like we're in this hard place, like we get really narrow vision.
Myopic.
And we start to feel hopeless and helpless, and like our life is over. And it's like we forget that grander perspective of like, what could happen tomorrow if you can just get to it, or in the next week. And so I would kind of love if you could share your take on that, because I've heard you say some really great things about it.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with teenagers and teenage boys, which for a lot of In a lot of situations, they're a little hard to get to because they're shut down and their neural pathways are starting to form and hormones are happening and their connections are not fully there until they're about 25 or 26. All of us as human beings, but especially it seems like boys, because the hormonal flow is very disruptive to their brain and body. And there's so much research about that. But one of the things I talk to them about is I say, look, here's your screen. Here's your life screen of your experience, no matter what age you're at, right? But when you're younger, it feels like this is what's going on, right? And if something happens, say it's, let me just do a metaphor, and then now you're asking. Something happens and it enters in, and here's this thing, and it's really big in the screen, and that's all you can think about. Yeah. So when you're 13 or 14 years old and something happens, it's huge. But as time goes on and life happens and you get older and older and older, this is a really good metaphor actually, and you start to get some perspective, then it's just this little spot in time that's happened down here. Yeah. But when you're in the middle of it, it's huge. And so you have to, sometimes as a practitioner of whatever modality, you have to be able to step back and go, hey, this is a blip in time. And one of the things that when I hear a client or a friend or family member say, I can't see myself getting beyond this and getting over it, what I have said to them is, let me hold the space for you to recognize that healing will happen until you can embrace it yourself. So let me hold that space for you. And all I'm trying to do is to say, I believe in you. I know that you can get through this. I know that the human spirit is unstoppable. And it's a moment in time. And I've been there. When my dad died, I was like, what the hell's life about? Because he and I were very close. And I had gone through a huge healing with him. We weren't close. We didn't get along. I had a very rough childhood with him, but I'd healed that in my early 20s. And then, I've had a couple of really severe breakups that have caused me to, a divorce about 3 years ago that it threw me for a loop because I didn't want it, didn't expect it, never thought that would happen. And here I found myself having to kind of pick up and build. I've had some health challenges throughout my time. And, I have enough perspective to be able to see, oh, I'll get through this. I'll get through this. I'll get through this. But depending on what age you are, you've got a smaller perspective. So it's difficult. And the mind's job is to create fear, doubt, and judgment. So it's constantly trying to make sure you're safe, but it adds to all the stress and the anxiety and the fear and the what ifs. And you have to learn, and I think through meditation, guided imagery, process work, how to quiet the mind and let the body be still, let the body give you the answers, let the spirit and the presence of who you really are at your core, not your mind. Your mind's job is, again, keeping you safe. So in that, it gets very active. And, I felt like I've gone through a bunch of different times in my life, period where, I was a clown, a period where I was a Broadway actor, period where I was in film and television. Then I became a father. And then I went to film school and became a director producer and was doing that all the while doing my own personal work. Then I became a practitioner in this modality of the journey. Then I became a seminar leader and led 1,000 seminars. And then I became a leadership coach, a business coach, so I've lived a bunch of lifetimes. And when I tell people some of the things I've done in a short time, I had one friend of mine who was a neighbor say to me, he said, Skip, you're not all those things. You're actually a secret agent that's living in the suburbs. And all these trips you're going off on are to do some kind of secret mission. You're just using this as a, as a block. It used to make me laugh because my life has always been very full. And it feels like at the end of every year, it's like, wow, so that happened. But, in saying all that, for the last couple of years, I've been working on a project, trying to get a project off the ground, and I haven't been as active. And like you and I were talking earlier, it's like, I'm surprised you've kind of let this linger on, but I know it's something that's going to potentially change the planet. So I'm willing to invest a lot of time and energy in it because I see the big potential of it. So from a healing level for other people, including myself.
Yeah.
So, we can make a lot of tracks, and we can just at times, life ebbs and flows, right? And I'm in an ebb. I've come back into myself with a divorce and the shift that I'm going through, and I'm ready to flow again. I'm ready to be in that flow.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing for people to grasp. I feel like during my healing, especially, so after, man, I'm going to have a hard time remembering all the renames in the book. After my relationship with Roger ended, I felt like I was in a productive pause, right? Like I had the swallowing thing happen. So there was health stuff that I needed to deal with, but it was also the same time where I had pulled down all the content off my websites. I was, before even Call of the Void had come to me, and I wanted to be pushing, I wanted to be in a different place. And even though I wasn't even making enough money to pay all my bills, it was like, I knew that it was important, that it was the most productive thing I could have been doing was to be just sitting in that pause.
Yes.
And I think it's really hard for people, especially like go-getters like you and I, and people who have visions and big goals, like to just be like, all right, I'm just going to kind of hang in this for a little while.
It is very difficult for type A personalities and people that are creatives or people that just have a dream or a passion about something to be able to sit back and do self-care, because, we're so hardwired about moving forward and driving and pushing. And, there are times when, and again, having that perspective, because I've been around a little bit longer, and knowing that those moments will come. They do. And I've been through those stagnant times, and then been able to come out of them. And the metaphor, which I know a lot of people have already heard, but that idea of during those times, you're going through self-healing, but it's almost like you're pulling the bow back or the rubber band, just getting prepared to shoot forward and create what you need to create. So I think it's important to not beat ourselves up in those moments, and you just really embrace it and say, this is where I'm at right now. It doesn't mean I'm going to be there tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. But right now, this is what is calling me, and not some BS kind of, some, spiritual bypass either. That's not what I'm talking about. Because taking action is important, but you're taking the action of stepping back and taking care of self, and have that be very conscious in those moments of taking care of the self, so that you're pepping for that. I mean, I was telling you, I went through that health challenge, right? And as I'm about to cough right now, and I realized that I had to take care of that, and I had to get to the bottom of it, and finally did, before I could move on to this next what I believe is going to be a powerful section of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at my age, I'm prepping to have this be, a big push that'll go into, I mean, it's weird to say that because I don't feel old, but, as I approach 60, I'm like, oh, I've got probably 12, 14 really productive years left of being able to be out doing, not saying that I don't have a lot to say and do, but it's weird to think about that, and this is, it's just a part of it. So I've learned that the shoulda, woulda, couldas, just to let them go. That's what the mind says. You should be doing this. You could have done that. If you would have, right? If only you would have. Got to let that go, because perfectionism is really the enemy of action. Right? It is the enemy of action.
Yeah. There's like 5 things I want you to talk about all at once, but I'm going to pick 2 because I think they go together.
Okay.
I would love to hear, or have you share, I feel like I know a lot of your thoughts, but have you share a little bit about the process of reorienting and around whatever situation you want to share. But what came to mind was you shared a little bit about your dad's death. And I know from conversations we've had that your career was on a certain track. And when that happened, it caused you to kind of pause and start moving in a different direction. So kind of talking about that experience of when something big, hard happens, like how it causes us to, it's like suddenly we're a stranger inside our own lives in certain ways. And then your own journey of reorienting. I know you've done that in a lot of different ways over your life. So
Yeah. Wow. I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but, it was interesting. In my acting career at that point at 23, I had early on at age 17, 18, I left home, left Arkansas and was working nonstop and was making a tremendous amount of money acting in New York in my early 20s, where a lot of people were still in college. I was out on the road working and then started doing commercials and voiceovers and got a commercial that I got a lot of attention from by the powers that be. I screen tested for the lead in Back to the Future. It was between me and Woody Harrelson for his role in Cheers. I had gotten on the A-list. I had just finished co-starring in a movie with Jim Carrey, and everything was moving in the right direction. And my agents were excited. I was, in LA. And then my dad was killed on a Delta plane crash. It crashed in Dallas in 1985. And it just made me stop and think and go, what am I doing? What is what I'm doing right now? How is that? What's my legacy? And I was 23 years old and already thinking about, gosh, your life can be gone like that. Things can end, and, in a very similar way with how you experienced that trauma with Brett going, oh my God, and, feeling the shoulda, woulda, coulda, and all of that. My dad made the decision at the very last second to get on. He was he was on another flight. And at the last second, he changed to this flight. So it really shook me up and made me think, these little decisions that we're making, there could be life or death decisions. And I'd never really thought about that as a hustling young 23-year-old whose life seemed like it was on a trajectory. And stepping back, this morning I was watching Lizzo on the news this morning, and I'd seen Billie Eilish. So these two singers that have had huge, a meteoric growth in their last year of their life. One's 17, 18 years old. The other one's in their mid 30s, right? And they've both gone up, and they were both talking about being depressed. And I was sitting there thinking, I was like, they have everything, and yet they're still in that depression because catching up, having their psyche and their neural pathways catch up with all the success, it's shocking to the system. So the system can be shocked with trauma, with receiving too much, not feeling good enough, because really they say that as people graduate from college, only 2% of people have a high sense of self-esteem. Yeah. Only 5% after they graduate high school. So what does that do? It doesn't set us up for success in life. So when this happened to me, looking way back on it a number of years ago, it's been over 35 years. I didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing, why I lost all my concept of the goal that I was going after, which was success. But then I started questioning, what is success? What is success? And I lost my drive, and I had to step back and take some time off. And so I kind of pulled back into myself and started doing a lot of personal growth work, and was still working. It was still doing things. It was still, my life was still moving forward. But what it was is it made me look at death. And I think for most people, and I'm going to make a broad statement here, and I don't know this to be 100% true, but what I find is people that are able to relax into their life have somehow faced their own mortality, whether they faced it directly or indirectly. It's a thing where you just have to say, you know what, at some point I'm not going to be here anymore. What does that mean? So you can stop and be present to the little moments in time, as opposed to always being driven. There's nothing wrong with being driven and having a success script of what you want. And It's great. And I think you have to face death before you can truly live. And you have to be able to recognize what that is, that there is a limited amount of time. I'm not trying to be, philosophical about this, but in essence, it's just a part of your maturation process as a human being that you get to that point. And I've recognized a lot of people that are at peace with themselves have faced that.
Yeah.
And because the fear has a tendency to melt away, that unconscious fear of death. And with the work that you've done with me, the leadership work, we really had identified that there are these certain patterns that most human beings go through, and it comes down to a fear of death, a fear of annihilation, a fear of humiliation, a fear of devastation. And once you meet that fear, then you can move forward in a healthy way around those specific kind of patterned responses that most human beings have.
Yeah.
And when you're being pushed in a leadership position or a position of creativity or any of those things, you have to be willing to come up against that. And that's that smack in the wall. You got to just, climb over it. Because it's going to happen.
After you pick yourself up off the ground.
Oh my God. There's a speaker that I heard him say, oh, who is it? Les Brown. I heard him speak one time, and he said, you're going to get knocked down. And when you get knocked down, roll up and look for the sky. And as long as you see the sky, you're okay. And you just got to get yourself up. Yeah. He said, but just roll over and look for the sky. And I'm still alive. And he made me laugh hysterically because I've been there. I've been knocked between the eyes, knocked down, knocked out. You kind of have to shake it off. And a lot of people get stuck because they're like, okay, I can't do it. And where does high sense of self-esteem come from? I don't know. I've been really doing a lot of my own personal research and trying to understand that, because I do have a high sense of self-esteem. And how did I escape that?
Yeah. And
I've been beat up and chewed up and spit out on, personally, work-wise. I've had trauma happen on so many different levels, and yet I just get up and shake it off and keep going because, I have that drive to want to help others. I really do believe it. If I've got this information that I know is helpful, I want to help get it out to, a wider audience so that people don't have to suffer in silence or suffer on their own.
Yeah. I would love to hear you talk about. So I like to use the example of glow sticks. I feel like, glow sticks are fine and good. They're solid little chunks that take up space, but it's not until we bend them and break them and crack them that they illuminate. Right. And so I use that to describe what it's like to go through these experiences that crack us open. But you said something to me a long time ago. It might have been right around that Thanksgiving point where I realized that I had to make the choice to rise up and come back, that it wasn't just going to happen on its own. But the idea of raising rock bottom up to meet you where you're at. So it's that, but it's also like, I feel like so many purpose-driven people have really activated and started acting on their purpose after a really painful, hard experience. But I don't think that always has to happen. So how can we crack ourselves open without the devastation?
It's a great concept. And I have a friend, his name is Aaron Huey, and he runs a sober living home for boys and girls up in Estes Park, up near Estes Park. And Aaron has a tough love kind of, sober living home. It's like a camp where kids come for a long time and they give them life skills. And I asked Aaron that question because so many people that were coming to me to do the work were at their lowest ebb, right? And I knew it was rock bottom. And I said to him one time, I said, you deal with a lot of people around the habit of, they have to either make that decision that they've reached rock bottom and they're not going to do it any longer. Do you think you have to hit rock bottom? That was my question to Aaron, because I had some concepts around it, and he and I had a discussion on a blog program that I used to do, and it was a beautiful discussion because what he said made a lot of sense to me. He said, you know what? I don't believe they do. He goes, I think there's a belief that you do have to hit rock bottom. And a lot of the, especially around like a 12-step program, you got to hit that rock bottom before you're willing to make the decision to make that habit change, because you have to be able to do it. And he said, but you don't have to hit rock bottom. You just raise up the floor to meet you where you're at right then. And you make the decision, I'm not going any deeper. I'm not going any deeper into the trauma, into the pain, into the hurt. I'm going to make this rock bottom. So you bring it up to meet you where you're at and say, you have to make that conscious choice. I'm going to move forward in a healthy way now. So that takes a lot of awareness, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. And when you're in trauma, you don't trust yourself. So it's almost like you do need either a process, I don't want to say a formula, that's not right, but a tool to come to the self-awareness realization of, hey, I can shift and change this. This is possible. And I'm going to say no more. I've reached my limit of not going into that pain any deeper. And I've tested that because recently when I went through this divorce, I had a relationship fail with my oldest son, and I was devastated. I went into depression for months, and it really affected me. And I said, this time when I got to a certain level, I went, okay, I'm not going any further. I'm not going to let myself go into that place of devastation. And I kept it right in the pain. And I didn't try to escape the pain or or not say I wasn't hurting, but I just realized, I just stopped and said, this is going to be my rock bottom. And I didn't have to go through the real gut wrenching stuff, and was able to pull myself out of it.
Yeah.
And still doing it on a regular basis. I still have the mind, fear, doubt, judgment. I'm judging myself around certain choices or not making certain choices. So learning to quiet the mind, bringing yourself up to the point where you go, no, I'm not going any deeper. I'm not going to let myself go into the place of devastation. It takes a tremendous amount of self-awareness, focus, and a continuation of being present in each and every moment to be able to say, where am I right now? Where do I want to be, and where do I need to be right now to be able to move forward in my life, and keep pulling yourself up, but not do the bullshit thing and do spiritual bypass and go, oh, I'm okay. Everything's fine. I did 5 yoga classes last week and I feel good and I don't have to go there. Yeah. Cause it's a bunch of BS, because, we go through it, and those are those times we've been pulled apart. And then when we come back together again, it's like there's this Japanese, I want to say kushogi or kugogi, where they take a piece of pottery that's been broken and they put it back together again, and they bind the broken pieces with gold, and it's stronger than it was before. It's just like I broke my collarbone. Now I can't remember. I broke my collarbone this summer in a bicycle accident on Father's Day with my kids in the bike park. And it was broken. It was a 3-inch break. And the metaphor is, the doctor said, just don't move it, be gentle with it, be still, and it will heal itself. It will come back and heal itself. And the idea is it's stronger than it was before. And I believe that the trauma also gives us the resolve and the self-awareness and this, the self-esteem to go, hey, I can pick myself up. I can move forward. I can achieve what I want. And yes, I'm going to get knocked down, but I know I'm going to be able to pop back up again. And during those moments, I always called myself the Weeble, because I would wobble and, every once in a while I'd fall down, but I would pop right back up again. And that was my mantra during a tough times in my life. I'm a Weeble and I wobble, but I don't stay down. I pop back up again.
I learned a lot about, so it was the chapter in Unravel on Thanksgiving where I'm reading the writer's journey, because it felt like I was like back at the deepest depths of my grief, and I felt like I was never going to get out of it. And so I was reading the writer's journey, which you recommended to me. And that's when I realized that I had to make the choice to rise up and come back. And so I talk a lot about choice, and I've since learned that it's not just choice. Like it's not choice from the desire perspective of like, that's the direction I want to go. It's like full body decision that this is what's happening now. This is who I am now. This is the way I'm moving, and I'm going to organize my life and everything I do and how I show up and the choices I make in the day to day in this direction. Like, it's not enough to just want it and to be like, I want this to be my bottom. I want to raise the bottom up to where I am now. Like, you have to decide that that's it. Like, I'm done with this. Still feel your feelings and all the things, but like, it's that decision that I don't think I understand. And when I look back at things, like even moving to the mountains, getting the Forerunner, like doing these things I wanted to do, none of it really happened until I decided like, this is what's happening now.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question, which is, was there a moment in time where you said to yourself, okay, I'm going to bring the bottom up? Because that's basically what you did. You brought the bottom up, and it was around reading The Writer's Journey, which kind of gave you that awareness around the journey that you're doing now, journey mapping. But it also was that other book, The Last Word on Power, which, you were taking your power back at that point. And with business coaching, when I coach people, I say it's important to be strategic in what you want, but it's also important to be strategic and say, and I don't want this, because those things, pull a lot of energy. And I watched you do that. I watched you pull your content down. I watched you do all these things, and I was like, whoa, where's that coming from in Stephenie? So where do you feel that came from?
Well, it's interesting because, and you and I have a really strong, like, energetic connection in our relationship. So you called me the day after Thanksgiving. It was like the very next day. And I had posted about like making the choice, like I'm choosing to rise. And you had told me that you had read one of my posts before, and it might've been on Thanksgiving or the day before, but you had that same hit that like, it's time for you to choose. Like, and then you told me the thing about raising rock bottom to meet you. So I didn't know that that's what I was doing. But it was very much understanding that like, how powerful choice is. Like, I didn't understand, and I wrote a lot about this, and it's in the Unravel book too, that I thought the hard part was the fall, right? Like the crashing, the hitting rock bottom. I didn't realize that the hard part was the coming back, because it's like, once you've fallen, it hurts and it sucks and it's hard, but like, now there's nothing to do but do that work to stand back up, find the sky, like you said, and get back up and climb back up. And I had not realized that was on me. I guess I kind of thought, like you hit rock bottom and you bounce back. Like you always hear those stories of like, I hit rock bottom, and then we don't talk about how the and then is like a series of choices and the untangling from everything that you lost on the fall, which isn't necessarily bad. Like there's some things that we lose, relationships or aspects of ourselves in our lives, and that's sad and we grieve them, but it's also like you lose everything that's no longer aligned. Like it forces you to come back to what's true for you. And I had to start untangling myself from all those old ways of being, because there was no going back. And I was already starting to realize that, but I didn't fully grok like how much so there was no going back,
right,
and how to choose to rise up and come back. I was going to have to continue facing parts of myself, facing choices I was making unconsciously, or just out of habit of like, who was in my life? How was I showing up with them? What was I doing in my work? Like I had to face each aspect of my life, big and small, in order to rise up and come back. So it was empowering in a really, one of those like really twisted, heartbreaking, I felt gutted all the time ways. Like I remember talking to you once, and that had come from reading The Last Word on Power and uncovering my winning strategy. And like, there was a day that I realized that I mattered. Like I have value and my wants and needs matter. And that destroyed me. Like I laid on the couch for 3 days and cried. And it wasn't a happy moment of like, oh, I have value, because you also have to face all the ways that you haven't been honoring that. And so like, I like to talk about the choosing, and I don't like to make it sound simple and inspiring, because it's not. It's like you have to face these parts of yourselves and do this work that guts you and learn a totally new way of being in the world. And I didn't have any guarantee that things were going to work out. Like pulling down all my content.
Yeah.
All I knew was that I had to do it. I didn't know that it was going to help me in the way that it did. I just knew that I had to. So it takes a lot of trust and faith that I don't think we're used to having to have. Like yeah.
Those are tough choices. And there is a roadmap, but there really isn't a roadmap. And each one of us is different. So, what does that look like for every single person? It was right for you. But I said to you, kind of as a business coach and as a success coach, I went, Stephenie, what the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing pulling all that content down? Why would you do that? And you were like, I have to do it. I have to do it. And I was like, I was shaking my head going, I don't get it, but I get that it's important for you and that you feel like you've got to do that. And I could feel the resolve in you that you were saying, hey, I have to do this. This is really important for me. And then when you said, hey, I'm going to move up into the mountains, I was like, really? You're kind of moving away from all your support system. But at that point, you had been making very specific choices. And, I was like, okay, and because no choice is forever. You can always choose to choose again. Right. Some people are afraid to make choices because it feels finite when you do it. But hey, you do the best you can with the information you have at any given time. And tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, you can go, hey, I choose to choose again. And this is what I choose now. And so for people to just get off this idea that it has to be forever. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I made that choice. It was the best one I could make now. And now I choose to come back and do this. Or I choose to, re-engage with someone in a different way that I had realized, hey, that wasn't healthy for me at that point in my life, or whatever it is. I mean, you pulled away from me for a period of time, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and part of that was, and especially not just with you, but in all my relationships in my life, like I think there was I did not trust myself. And part of that was because of the PTSD, and because the PTSD had landed me in situations that were not great. I was like, I didn't know how to make decisions for myself anymore. And I was scared to death, especially after the swallowing thing, to do things wrong. And so there was this necessary stepping away from all of my community and relationships. And even like coming to the mountains may not be forever. There's going to come a point when I'm like, I miss my people and I want more relationships and communities. But it's like, it's been this process of like, I'm going to step as far back as I can so that I can hear myself, so that I can get really clear on what it is that I want, so that I can live my life in a way that's true for me without considering anyone else. And that's extreme. I don't think that everyone needs to do that. But for me, it was like, I couldn't hear myself anymore. And even though like the people that I was leaning on, like you and other friends, you're all people I trust immensely. I literally trust you with my life. It was this like, I needed to get as solo and quiet and isolated as possible so that I could make better decisions for myself. And I got better at doing that in relationship. Like, I don't think that people have to step that far back. But I feel like it's allowed, like our relationship has gotten deeper and stronger. Other relationships have fallen away. Some of them have come back. It's like, if you're not clear on who you are and what it is that you want, you don't trust yourself to navigate things. Mm-hmm. I think that's where this rising up part gets really hard, because you're going to lean on people and they have their best intentions for you, but they don't ultimately know what's right for you.
No, and they can't. All they can do because of their own life experience is say, this has worked for me. And, and as a coach, oftentimes when I think there might be something to offer, I would say, hey, this has worked for me. And I don't know if it'll work for you. Maybe try it on, see if it does. If it doesn't, let it go. But it was a point where I understood why you pulled away. And I was actually very proud of you that you were making those decisions, because you needed to get quiet and go inside and learn how to trust your own voice again, because,
Yeah.
your winning strategy was to do whatever you could to make sure that everybody was getting their needs met. And that's how you, were fitting in and being successful. But this was you finding your own voice and a strong version of that. And that was you raising up and going, nope, I'm not going. I need to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to cocoon ourselves off, and go into a healing mode. And that's kind of what you did, was giving yourself some space to just be you. And you knew what was important to you was to be up in the mountains and to be sitting near the creek side and to be on a little hike and be out in nature and take care of yourself. And you've done that, and you're still doing it. So here's a question for you. How does journey mapping, with going through those sections of journey mapping, because I know that people in general are resilient. And when people can embrace grit in their life and go, I know I'm going to be resilient, I'm going to come out of this, that's first and foremost. And then there are roadmaps that help us see what's coming. How do you feel that journey mapping fits into you being able to maybe help some others expedite, not the healing process, but the self-awareness process, where they know, hey, this is what this overall experience looks like. This is kind of the universal human experience has been written about since the Greek myths, since the beginning of time, right? So how does that play into this, and how might that speed things up for others?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I love about the way I've designed it is I'm like, I harp so much on work needs to be process oriented. I don't care what you're doing, whether you're working directly with people as a coach, or you're providing a service like we do with our websites. Like, everything must be process oriented, because, and I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, right? Like, everyone is unique and different.
We haven't talked about, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, we could do a whole program on that.
But I have the unique and different as part, like, right, I'm the individualist. And so the way that I see the world, which I think is true, we're all unique and different. Like, we have all had our own experiences. We all have our personality type, which maybe there are only so many personality types, but you're your own version of that one, right? So the way that it's built is that you move through the actual core work of, like, looking at the world before and going through death and rebirth and choosing to rise up and come back, and ultimately stepping into your purpose, like who you're here to be and the work you're here to do. But the core of it, like, I don't care where you're starting, where you are in your journey mapping process, the core of it, which is the first phase, is you have to know who you are. Like, you have to know yourself, and you have to trust yourself and your intuition. And you have to be able to discern for yourself, because what was so hard for me, which we were just talking about, was discernment. Like, the world is constantly shouting things at us.
Exactly.
And not that it's bad things, right? Like, I talk about the relationship stuff. Like, I had heard from so many sources that, like, if you love someone, you stay and you work on it, or all you can ask for is someone who does. And it's like, that's true, but it wasn't right for my situation. And same with business stuff, and same with healing and my health stuff. And it was like, it took really rooting into myself and knowing who I was and what was right for me, being able to discern, being able to use my voice and speak, like, basic, but really hard and often unlearned skills for, like, how do you navigate life and how do you stay true to who you are? Because journey mapping, as with everything I do, is ultimately about purpose. Who are you here to be in the work you're here to do? And you can't do that, and you can't go through healing processes or grow your business or rebuild your business or find the right relationships if you don't know yourself and you don't trust yourself. So that's the key foundational. And then everything else you navigate from there. It's not do as I do, or here's the hero's journey process, or here's whatever framework. It's like, these are the core things to work through. Now that you know yourself and you can make discernment, you can be discerning and you can make decisions and you can own what you want, and all those things, have your own back. Now you can navigate this for you, so that ultimately, whatever it is that you're going through, big or small, you are clear on who you are and you're able to really step into that next version of yourself. But that's the core piece.
Well, I think, like, with your process of journey mapping, it's like, here's a stepping stone, and you go, here's where I'm at right now. And sometimes, you have to fall into the unknown a little bit, into the void, and you're like, oh my goodness, to step onto the next step. And
Yeah.
so trusting that the step will show up when it's time for you to go to the next place, and having some kind of a larger, broader concept of the universe will rise up to meet you when you're ready for that. Because so often people get lost and they feel like, oh my gosh, I can't move forward. I have a couple that's coming in from out of town to work with me for 3 days starting tomorrow. And, they've done some other previous work with me in the past, not as a couple, but as individuals. But they were like, we know that there's some solutions there, but we're lost right now in what we need to do to move forward in our own lives. And so couples work is something that I haven't done in a while, because I went through, that breakup.
Yeah.
But I've been doing a tremendous amount of self-growth work, self-awareness work to say, hey, how did I participate in this situation? What happened? Caught me off guard. And I've continued to do my own personal growth work. I think, as all of us, self-awareness and self-honesty and being brutally honest of where you're at with your behaviors is the key to personal growth.
Yes.
And as long as you're moving forward, in that way, and it never stops. I love I used to get asked this question all the time when I was teaching these workshops of, when we were doing this deep upheaval, just letting go of all these, these really painful situations. I remember one person said, does it ever stop? And I went, oh yeah, all that pain stops. And I said, would you guys like to understand? I can give you an experience of when it stops. And they were all like, yeah. So I said, okay, everybody breathe in. The whole room breathed in, and I said, now breathe out. Let it all out. Never breathe in again. That's when it stops. Because I have spent a lifetime of, self-awareness work, and it gets easier, but so far it never stops. And when I talk to even enlightened masters, I've spent time over in India on a number of occasions talking to enlightened masters, and they have all kinds of answers. And yet there's certain things that they go, that's the unknowable, right? That's what makes it interesting. That's why we're all in this together, and we're doing this work together, is to try to continue to unveil. So I think your journey mapping tool is great, because it helped people realize the potential next step. And you might skip over some of those steps, and you might go to one and jump to another backwards. But it's a bit of a roadmap where people can recognize there is something that can help bring them out of their, darkest times.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love for you to share some of your tools. And before you do, I want to say that I have done a lot of your work.
Yeah.
So the journey processes we've done, I talk about 2 of them that gave me my life back, because those were 2 really critical moments in my life. So the PTSD, it gave me, not all of it, but most of my brain back overnight. And it was less than 2 hours, I think, our process. And then you did a mix of processes, and you danced around my living room when I couldn't swallow and got me to eat for the first time, to consume anything for the first time in 9 days. So I've done the journey processes. I've gone to the intensives that you have taught. And then I've also done Praxis, the leadership.
My leadership program.
Yeah, which is a mix of bringing in the journey processing, and then just like your wealth of knowledge around what it takes to really be a leader, which I think is great for people who are entrepreneurs and in business or in corporate. But I also think it's great for anyone who, leadership skills are important.
Everybody's a leader in some way, shape, or form. You lead yourself, family, friends, or an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you have 5-Star by Design, which I have not taken, but I have heard a lot about, and I have seen a lot of what you've created for it. And what else do you have? Oh, it was right on the tip of my tongue. Meditation prescription.
Yeah.
I would obviously we don't have all day, but I would love for you to talk about all the resources that you have, because I feel like what you've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've pulled a lot of tools that have helped you personally. A lot of you research like a crazy person. You're always learning. You can actually, it's not just meditation is great for you. It's here's the science behind it.
Right.
And also things you've developed yourself. You've pulled everything together, and you've put them in these different places that people can learn from you. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about all that goodness.
Gosh, that's it. That's a big topic, but I'd love to share certain things. So I started meditating at age 11, back in the early 70s, right? And I meditated on and off, gosh, for what is it, 40, 50, almost, well, 50 years, basically, almost, or 48 years or whatever. I'm 58 right now as we record this. And so I think meditation as a tool for stress reduction, for health, for awareness, it's a real key core. And if people aren't meditating, they should. And so I had created this a website where people could come and get specific meditation tools, because a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't meditate." So I created a bunch of guided imagery tools that help people get to connect with their source and their self, and for mindfulness and all that. So also, what's really important is emotional intelligence. And that's something that's been thrown about in corporate, but basically it's self-awareness, self-realization, empathy building skills, compassion, kindness, listening skills, communication. It's basic stuff, but it's the foundation of a lot of the healing work. So I was certified in neurolinguistics programming, neuroassociative conditioning. I've studied hypnosis. I've studied nutrition. I'm a journey practitioner, and the journey is a modality that a friend of mine, Brandon Bays, had created, and I was with her when she had a life-threatening basketball-sized tumor in her uterus that went away in 3.5 weeks after she had this spontaneous experience. So I've put thousands of people through that workshop, because that was a huge tool for me coming back from a breakup of a relationship where I was in a deep depression, was able to forgive myself. I had a lot of just kind of, I would say self-esteem stuff, but it was abandonment issues that have shown up in my life. That's kind of my core thing that I've been able to identify and see where it's come up. And I feel like recently I've been able to get to the core of that after all these years, and all that work have finally got to it in this last, during my divorce. I've really been able to see where that was coming from, and hopefully clear the vast majority of it. Do we ever get rid of it? I don't know, but it's not showing up like it used to.
Yeah.
Then I've got all the leadership skills. So we took the journey work. Brandon's husband, Kevin Billett, and I took journey work, and we created this leadership program that we took into the Justice Department of Canada and helped overhaul their leadership work, and did this nationwide training program with Justice Department of Canada, bring consciousness there and helping be a part of that. I've gone into the World Bank and taught workshops there. I've done a lot of corporate work with that leadership. But like you said, Stephenie, everyone's a leader. And what we've done is, being a leader is being authentically you as best you can. It's being authentically you as best you can, and being able to really allow that part of you to come forward and be that, whatever that is. And it's different for all of us. So being able to be in integrity, being accountable for you and your actions, being authentic, being mindful, being compassionate, and all of that. And we've identified certain things, that patterns that show up in people's lives, and so you can go down, face that fear, whatever that is, of being exposed and humiliated and devastated and annihilated, all that. Then you have the freedom to be fully you. And then the 5-Star by Design program came out of me business coaching a lot of people and helping them with structure, systems, operations, controls, strategic leadership, growth mindset, HR stuff, team building, cash flow, financials, how to read a P&L, and utilizing the consciousness skills in building a small to medium-sized business. So I have a huge toolkit of being able to help people wherever they're at, whatever they need, and can go into organizations. I do culture building, because basically that's emotional intelligence in action, engagement. I've gone into large corporations and done that. So the journey work is my core, being able to get people to recognize who they are at the core of their being, and to remove those blocks and situations, and through forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others, that cause us not to have that sense of self-esteem, or
Yeah.
cause us to be ill or feel less than, or, I work with people that have phobias, right? And do very simple fear of flying, fear of snakes, fear of driving, whatever, and have a, close to 100% success rate there. When you were talking about the eating and drinking where you weren't doing that, I got in the car to come up and help you because I'm like, oh my God, Stephenie, you haven't eaten in 9 days. You can't swallow. What? I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there. I had no idea. I had a couple of ideas of where we could go, but that was a new one for me all the years and hadn't done that. So,
Yeah.
at the end of it, you ate half a bowl of soup and then you were able to eat a little bit more. And I think I did another kind of a tune up with you a handful of days
You
later.
did a handful of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were able to get over that because it was an idea that you had that was stopping your autonomic nervous system from being able to do what it does naturally, right? And there was an interrupt. So a lot of the work that I do goes into the brain and says, okay, we've got programming from A to B, A to B, A to B. We're just going to create a C, and we're going to bypass the B by just interrupting a programming that has just kind of risen up. It's kind of like computer programming. You write a more elegant program and it overwrites it.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what we do on an unconscious level through letting you find yourself. So that's I went in a million different directions and I felt like squirrel. I can talk about this. I can talk about that. Right. But hope that gives people an idea of a bunch of different ways I might be able to help or support folks.
Well, and I want to say too about the process work. There's stuff that we're dealing with. Like I didn't really understand PTSD until you were like, you have PTSD. And now I understand that sudden loss leads to PTSD for a lot of people. Like people are walking around with health ailments. Their memory doesn't work. They're in pain. They keep recreating the same relationships or situations. Like if there's something that you're not happy with about your life or your health or how you're feeling or the way that you're functioning or not functioning, it's not something you have to tolerate.
No.
And maybe it doesn't change overnight, like work with Skip, and it might because he's amazing, right? Like I could work after losing my brain over a series of months. I got up the next day and I worked. And then I got sick because it was such an intense process. But like I was able to start working right away. I was able to start eating right after you gave me a process. And even sometimes I forget, like, as soon as we're done with this recording, I want to ask you about doing some process work around certain things because I'll realize every now and then I'm like, oh, this isn't something that I have to tolerate. I forget that I have resources, even though I've used them so much over the last 5 years and they've helped me so much. Like it's easy to forget that there are resources. And even if you're an open-minded skeptic or skeptical, like why not give it a try? Like if there's something you're not happy with, it's not something you have to tolerate. And it's not always as simple as, I talk in the Unravel book about the lower back and hip pain that I had. It was severe. Like there were times everything hurt. I was never not in pain. I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And that was a physical manifestation of emotional trauma. Like
Right.
the physical things that we experience, yes, they're actually physical and they can be helped in some ways with some of the physical treatments, but the emotional aspect of it, like go work with Skip, get a process. That I think helped me far more quickly than therapy ever could. And there's been some things where we've had to do tune-ups or we've had to do multiple processes, but it's like, I just want to like hammer home that you don't have to feel this way. Like you don't have to stay stuck. It goes back to that choice and decision and the willingness to try things. Like when I stopped swallowing, our process was the first thing that got me eating. And then as I continued to get better, we did more tune-ups and I threw everything at it. Like I went to all kinds of people for help because it was like, I'm going to use all of my resources.
Right.
And I just like, I can't stress it. Like you don't have to struggle. Like you have a choice and you can try things. And there are people like Skip. There are processes like The Journey. There are programs like Praxis. There's tools out there. Just go out there and start try different things.
And, it's important because things are shifting and changing. Say 10 years ago, people believed that once your brain cells died, they never came back, right? So now we understand that there's neuroplasticity, and your brain is growing and reprogramming itself all the time. We've learned about epigenetics, which is above genetics, right? There are a lot of cellular biologists that have been talking about it, but they were poo-pooed for years, and about cellular memory and what's going on. That's this new thing. Cell signaling. I'm working on a project right now with this new company that I'm in the process of developing that helps people, because our bodies are kind of light and sound machines with emotion and energy. And, traditional medicine and psychology doesn't quite fully embrace it yet. There are little sections and sectors of these things that are now becoming more aware of it. But Chinese medicine has been around for years, says, hey, we're all energy, right? So that energy affects that emotional energy, the energy outside, all the toxins and the disruptors from Wi-Fi and 5G and all these things you're hearing about. Our bodies are just meant through evolution to be giving and receiving information. It's like you said, hey, you called me right after Thanksgiving. It was almost like I was in tune with you.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I've been thinking about you. You keep popping up into my awareness. I believe that, these kind of communications are going on all the time. And we are being disrupted and interrupted, and it's causing more and more stress, more and more anxiety, more and more fear, more and more, I don't know what to do. And so there are tools that are being developed all the time that help people get back and create these, these spheres of healing, these bubbles of pockets of being able to take care of yourself, where you, like you said, that's a great term. You don't have to tolerate the pain and the suffering. There are tools out there. And so many people will say, sorry, can't do it. And that's because they have a limited thinking. I've probably worked with thousands of people, a handful of people that I had to say, you know what, I can't help you. And I'm not sure that you're ready to help you. It was just because they weren't ready to help themselves.
Yeah.
Because doing this kind of work at this level, it's for the brave. It's not for somebody who just wants to dip their toe in, really. I mean, the kind of work that I do is really digging under the surface, and it's not therapy, because it's allowing that person to uncover what needs to be cleared for them. Not what I'm doing or saying. It's just me holding space for people to have their experience. They have to make that choice to have it. And I can help them. And if there's fear or not knowing, or that's what gosh, I was about to say that. I don't think I've ever said. I'm kind of a master at that. That's my superpower, is being able to help people uncover what that is. But yeah, you don't have to tolerate it. There are things, there's all kinds of tools out there. And what I love is you're sharing a lot of those tools in the Unravel book. And, when you're giving people a roadmap to how they can recognize that there is a process for healing from PTSD. I've worked with tons of military and police and firemen that have all this trauma, and, parents and, people that have had, all kinds of things happen, from satanic cult to plane crashes to loss of a loved one and grief. And the body wants to heal. It's a healing machine. You just got to get out of its way and let it happen.
And it's really, my whole thing when it comes to this kind of work is you have to be open-minded. I am self-proclaimed open-minded skeptic to everything woo and energy and process work. Like I always go into these things with a little bit of like, this is not going to work for me. But when you're too busy resisting it, like the work can't do what it's supposed to do. And then I feel like, I know I've become this really woo sounding person, but it's like science just hasn't caught up yet. Like we know that it works. And when you do the work, you will experience it for yourself. And like you've said, you started meditating probably back when it was like, it was such a weird hippie thing.
Oh yeah, exactly right.
And now there's
weirdo in high
science.
school. Now there's science behind it, and there always has been. It always existed. It just science hadn't caught up with it yet. And I was the one in high school in my early 20s when, hey, everybody would go, oh, you're doing that woo-woo stuff, and and I would go, But when there was a problem, and they had gone and they'd exhausted everything else, they came to me. And that's what I would tell people. So go out and do everything else when you realize that may or may not work. And if it doesn't work, then come to me. Because when you've reached rock bottom and you were ready, or raise rock bottom up, when you're ready to heal, I can help hold that space for you to do that. But you have to be ready. And I will sometimes push some people off and go, you know what, I'm not sure that you're ready to do the work at this level, because there's still there. If they want, and they go, no, I am, then I know they are ready, right? So I want people who done everything else and they don't know where else to turn on all levels. I thrive on that.
So tell people where they can find you to learn from you and work with you.
Well, my website, which you built, Skip at skiplackey.com, skiplackey.com, skiplackey.com. Stephenie built that. She's built most of my websites.
And it will shoot you off from there to all your other websites too.
Yeah, that's kind of a site that'll go to the meditation prescription. It'll go to 5-star. It'll go to Praxis, depending on what anybody's looking for. If you've listened to this whole thing, God bless you. God bless you. You are a glutton for punishment. And that's another thing that's important for healing, is having a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
Normally I've got you laughing a lot.
Get yourself a healer who was once a clown.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Where'd you get that healing from? I got it from some clown. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I love you. I appreciate you. I hope you guys read the book just so that you can see how impactful those processes can be. I don't go into super great detail, but I mean, Skip literally gave me my life back twice. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. And the book was amazing. And as soon as I read, I couldn't put it down. And not just because I was in the book, but I literally started reading it and I was like, this is going to help a lot of people who are questioning where they're at, to show them that they, like you said, they don't have to tolerate it. There is a way in, through getting it and coming out of it.
Yeah.
So thank you for asking me to come on and share, and if anybody's interested, reach out to me. Happy to help support you on your own healing path.
Yes, skiplackey.com. All right. Thank you.